Greetings, friends. Rob Zarka here. These are some slides from a presentation that I presented in our Focus on Student Learning workshop earlier this week. And while I have them at hand and have the presentation fresh in the old memory banks, I thought I'd run through it here in a quick screencast, maybe with not as much hands-on demonstration. But this is a broad overview of open educational resources from the perspective of faculty and why we would want to undertake them, and some pointers toward various resources that can help if trying to find them, adopt them, or create them yourself. So let's dive in. So first of all, here's what we're going to cover. If you already know all about OER, fast forward a little and look for some resources at the end. And of course, my email address is at the end if you'd like to email me for these slides with all the linky links. And I also have a couple of other presentations that I've done over the past couple of years that have more detail on some of these tools under tools for creating OER. And to set a good example, putting right up front a license here for these slides that says, hey, you're free to take these and redistribute them, use them how you see fit, as long as you give me credit. And of course, we'll be seeing references to a lot of licenses throughout this presentation to give you an idea of how much is out there that is openly licensed under one license or another from Creative Commons. All right, so what are open educational resources? And now not everybody agrees on exactly what an OER learning object is, but there's some elements in common, and I think some distinguishing characteristics that really get at the heart of the OER movement or program. So open educational resources, according to Wikipedia, are teaching, learning, and research materials intentionally created and licensed to be free for the end user to own, share, and in most cases, modify. And I think this is a pretty good definition of how folks use the word. Now, not everything that's an open resource was intentionally created to be an open resource, and not everything that was created as an open resource is necessarily intended to be an educational resource. That doesn't mean you can't use those. But maybe it's fair to say that we want to put this label on things that were created with education in mind. And one of the other sort of sticking points here is that we can all agree that all of these Creative Commons licenses that you're going to see me referencing throughout here, including Wikipedia's, right, which is a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license, they do allow folks to keep a copy of the object, to share it. But some of them you'll see allow modifications, some of them don't. And so maybe that is kind of the sticking point. But I would certainly agree that only in the cases where you're able to modify the resources are we going to get the full value of OER. So that, I think, definitely represents the ideal for OER. And often when we talk about OER, we talk about the 5 R's. And if you are from the open source world, as we'll discuss shortly, you kind of recognize this already because these are the basic principles of free software. So just, repurposed for a different type of content. So ideally, with an OER resource, you're able to, of course, retain it. And that is a big deal, right? Because we're living in a time when many of our students are, and I'm making bunny ear quotes here that you can't see because I'm off camera, but they're renting their textbook, right? So they don't have anything to show for it at the end of the semester. And in fact, can't even necessarily use it in all the ways they would like to, including offline. If it's ideal OER, you're free to revise it, right? Edit it, adapt it, modify it, and reuse it, publicly reshare it, and remix other resources into something new. One of the textbooks I'm using this semester is very clearly remixed from many open sources, appropriately credited in every section, And it's not it doesn't flow perfectly smoothly, but it does demonstrate that you can sort of pick and choose the best of many resources to put together something new and valuable for your class. And of course, the redistribution, right? Because if we do all this work to create resources and then we lock them up in a way that can't be shared, then again, we're not capturing the full value of OER for our students and for students generally. And again, as you can see, right, this is something that is available under an open license. Now, this one is CC BY, Creative Commons Attribution NC, where the NC means non-commercial, right? So a variety of licenses available. Now, as someone whose background is in open source software, I have been offering internet hosting services of various kinds since the early 90s and was an early champion of the Linux operating system. Not really a developer, but someone who can code just enough to be dangerous, I would say, and have, released small things, small pieces of software under an open source license in the past, short scripts and so forth. Definitely for me, this is all of a piece with free Libra and open source software, a general term for things that started out as our problematic saint, Richard Stallman, named it as free software, kind of got rebranded to open source software, and a lot of folks have started using the word Libra instead of free because free has multiple connotations there. And this is something that is really as old as I am, but Stallman started the Free Software Foundation in the 80s. And so there has been a robust ecosystem of open source software. And I guarantee 99.9% of people that will listen to this screencast are using open source software, whether they realize it or not. So we've had massive success taking over the world domination, as we used to say in the early days of Linux. We didn't achieve it the way we thought we would, but we have achieved it. So these are very much related concepts, but of course, what's appropriate for software is not necessarily appropriate for other types of resources. And so there are a new set of licenses that, instead of the ones that are used for open source, like the GNU public license, are better fitted for purpose for open educational resources. Now, another related concept is open access. In fact, if we just go back a couple of slides here, one slide, this little icon you may be used to seeing on journal articles that are quote unquote open access. And, that is, again, a very closely related concept, sort of the move toward open access in academia, or maybe move back to open access might be even a better way to say it, started at around the same time as the move to open educational resources, roughly 25 years ago now. But that is focused more around not locking up research product and allowing people to actually read all those journal articles that are being cited without, pledging their firstborn child to Elsevier or, insert your favorite publisher to complain about here. And so, I mean, they are related, but especially the remixability and adaptability aspect of ideal OER is not necessarily part of the open access movement. Even though, they both use Creative Commons licenses, sort of you'll see less permissive licensing often in the open access space. And these, of course, are broad generalizations. So what's an example of some open educational resources? MIT OpenCourseWare is probably the granddaddy, maybe not the first, of course. And clearly educators have always been making and sharing things for a long time before we had this name for it. But this was a really big and well-publicized effort to get resources for learning out of the, gates of academia and out into the world. And this is a great resource. In fact, when I returned to college, I dropped out of a PhD program and started an internet service provider back in the 90s. But I returned to college. I was working on a second bachelor's degree in math, and these resources were fantastic I looked at some of the ones about, I think, I learned some set theory from them, worked through lots of extra problems for, learning to do proofs and so forth. And one of the things I enjoyed the most in my travels through the OpenCourseWare catalog were the ancient lectures from, honestly, I don't remember if it was Jay Sussman or Hal Abelson that was delivering the lectures, and I feel bad about that. Um, but screens were much smaller then. This is Hal Abelson, the co-author of one of the classic texts in computer science that probably, for an entire generation, every freshman at MIT used, and many folks elsewhere, has a fantastic cover. And one of the classes that was all the material was online for was that introductory computer science class using Scheme, which is a variant of Lisp, which involves a lot of parentheses. And so it was hilarious watching these videos from, I believe they were from the mid to late 90s, mid to late 80s. But they were certainly fairly old, and not only were students dressed a bit differently, but the professor in this computer science class was using a chalkboard. And that is hilarious when you're doing complicated Lisp programming, because there were a lot of angry chalkboard parentheses. Well, so, entertainment value aside, right, this brought what was a fantastic class, and in many ways a class different from what many students would have seen at their own university, which might have been using at that time, say Java, a very different language and very different approach to teaching, to anyone in the world that could, had enough bandwidth to download the videos and the problem sets and so forth. So really fantastic. Well, so Abelson not only involved in OpenCourseWare there at MIT, also involved in founding the Creative Commons, which is the source of, 99% of folks that license OER content use one of these Creative Commons licenses. And I encourage you to follow the link here or just Google and take a look at what Creative Commons has to offer. Now, they're, according to their mission statement, a lot more than just a bunch of lawyers who drafted some licenses for us. But this is, day to day, their most visible activity. And one of the nice things that they have on this website is just a little dialogue that you can use to pick the appropriate license for your project. So even if you're not 100% sure which license fits or even what the options are, this will walk you through saying, okay, for example, do you want to allow commercial use or not? Do you want other people to be able to modify it or not? And then end up with the appropriate license and an appropriate link that you can make to the license. So a fantastic resource that everyone should be using. All right, well, that is a little bit about the what and why. And, from my perspective, I barely even need to ask this question. To me, it's obvious, but, maybe this is it can be a lot of work. And so why should we do this as instructors? Well, of course, I think the absolute biggest reason is that it benefits our students. And as instructors, we care about our students, right? We want them to succeed. And, academia is on the ropes right now. A lot of schools really struggling with their budgets. And what helps our budget become healthy? Having students paying tuition. And students only pay tuition if they continue as students, right? So we want persistence from our students all the way to that degree at the end. We don't want them to rack up a student loan bill and then drop out and not have a degree to show for it. And for a lot of students on the margin, having to pay $500 or so per semester for textbooks, that's a big ask. Certainly here at Shepherd, we have a lot of students who are already working part-time, some of them working full-time during their undergrad experience. And these aren't even necessarily non-traditional students, quote unquote. These are just, hey, these are our students. Like me, when I was an undergrad, they got to pay the bills and they've got to go out and work. And that does not leave them a lot of time for studying. And the more we ask them to pay, the more work they have to do, the less time they have for studying and succeeding and making it to that end goal, right? So if we can save them money, even if we do nothing else with OER, I think that's a really big win. And it's especially at a big win at an institution like Shepherd, where we really are focused on teaching and having our students succeed. So, and I'm sure if you're listening to this, your institution is the same, right? And so I think if we can possibly do this, we really owe it to our students. But notice not just cost savings, but other benefits. So they can engage with the content we're using for the course before, during, and after the course. And that's not true if we're asking them to rent their textbook. And that's something we used to have, right? We've lost it because we've allowed publishers to sort of take over the way we deliver the content of our courses. And I think we need to take that back. And OER is, if I may speak broadly, a revolution to do that. At least some of us probably see it that way. All right, so the benefits to students, I think, are pretty clear. What about the benefits to instructors? And maybe less clear, but I think also important. And I would say here it is: the freedom to adapt open educational resources to our instructional needs. This is really attractive for us, right? I mean, all of us, I think, have had the experience of working with someone else's textbook or other course materials, and generally liking 80 or 90% of it, but then we find, gee, I want to present things in a different order, or I really don't like the way they do this chapter, I want to replace this, or they don't cover this topic enough, I want to supplement it with something else. And if we have an open educational resource, it's very easy to adapt, improve, add, subtract, reorder, or remix with additional content. And of course, if we create our own OER, well, we can do that as well. Either adding that to existing resources and so on. Also, we can feel free to share more resources with our students than we would if we were asking them to buy them, right? So you might say, well, I've got to pick sort of the best textbook and stick with that because I can't ask my students to buy 2 textbooks. But if I have 2 free textbooks, I certainly can ask them to, quote unquote, buy 2 textbooks, right? So this is going to enable us to teach more effectively and in the way that naturally fits how we want to present the material. I think that's a really beautiful aspect of OER. And then also, it gets better every semester because whether we create it ourselves or whether we're adapting someone else's text, we are putting whatever effort we put in, right, is still there the next semester, and it's just better every time. And so I'm in that process myself with a textbook that I'm writing for 2 of my classes. And, one of the classes, it's a Principles of Economics textbook, so there's some overlap. For the micro half of it, it's pretty much there. I want to add a couple of things. I haven't come close to my ideal, but it's in good shape. I already feel very good about it. And, a few more semesters and I'm going to feel even better. And same thing with the macro half. Right now, it's kind of a sketch. It's going to be a little filled out more at the end of this semester and so forth. And, the more I teach this class, the better it's going to get, instead of just taking whatever might come my way from a commercial text. So that's really fantastic for me. And then also my colleague, Jim, here at Shepherd has noted, right, that it can play a role in the tenure process, and he has successfully achieved tenure. Congratulations, Jim. But he wrote this article when he was still an assistant professor, and this I think I'm not going to try to put words in his mouth, but I can see that for me, who is currently in that process. First of all, it's going to make things better for my students, and when my students are having a better experience, it's going to be reflected in my course evaluations and the word of mouth about Zarka and how good his classes are. But also, right, it's the OER that I'm creating or the work I'm doing is visible. to the folks that are going to review my tenure application. And it's visible to my colleagues, and it can be visible to anyone, right? If I do a better job of putting it out there. So, uh, as academics, what we really care about, I think most of us, right? It's not the few bucks we might get from a publisher. Most of us are not Greg Mankiw or someone else who has a very successful text. We're looking at a few $1,000, from a publisher if we actually do all this work to create a textbook. That's not our primary motivation, right? It is we want credit for our hard work, and of course, we want people to read what we've written, use what we've written, and advance our educational goals. And there's no reason that should be limited to our own classroom. So I think for instructors, the case is also clear, even though, as I will acknowledge, it can be a lot of hard work depending on what kind of project you undertake. And we certainly should point to our results here in West Virginia. So just since 2021, we've had a program here that has encouraged instructors with some, very modest grants, but very welcome. Thank you very much. To adopt, adapt, create OER, and we've had a lot of instructors doing that. A lot of great momentum, and thinking about the methodology that's used here, you could easily argue that this figure understates the dollar impact. There are also ways in which maybe it overstates it a little bit. You can make arguments either way, but I think clearly, since this figure is from spring of 2025, by now we've saved students well over $10 million. I know when I've run the numbers myself versus the cheapest option that I could have had my students buy, I've saved them tens of thousands of dollars, and I feel really good about that. Now, I have put in a lot of work as well, but that's okay. That's my job, right? Kudos to Open Learning West Virginia and the state of West Virginia. And one of the most exciting things about having moved here and taken a job in West Virginia is this commitment here at Shepherd to teaching, and in West Virginia more broadly to open educational resources. Fantastic. All right, so some examples. I'm not going to take the time to jump out and look at these. Maybe at the end I'll do a little demo, but you'll have the link in the slides if you want to follow it. This is a publicly accessible link where you can preview some packages I've uploaded to our Learning Object repository on Shepherd's instance of Brightspace. You can't currently download them from there, but you can preview them. And let me just say, if anyone looks at these and decides they want some of them for their own, I already have them packaged as SCORM objects that you can upload right into your LMS, and happy to provide those to you. I'll have them up on a website soon. But this is an example of some of the work I've done for two of my classes, my Spreadsheet Fundamentals class and our Business Information Systems class, which is also very Excel heavy among all the other things we ask students to do in that class. It is a bit of a fire hose, I'll admit. So I want to give them all the support that I can for learning Excel. And this is something that I've created completely with open source software. And the textbook I originally used the first semester I taught this class was pretty expensive, and frankly bad, just bad. Even though it was in its 8th or 9th edition by then, it was just horrible. As someone coming from a background of actually, doing this stuff in the real world, I just thought the person that wrote this textbook, who I won't name or shame, really just was not getting there. And I spent a lot of time saying, well, the book is wrong about this, or all this stuff the book is saying, nobody uses these actual terms out in the real world, don't worry about them. So I switched, first of all, to an open access textbook, which is better. It's not my ideal textbook, but it's better. And of course, now I can add to it if I want to, without having to rewrite the entire book. So that was great, and I saved my students a bunch of money. One thing I had to do, though, to make that work was to come up with more resources to support learning Excel, because one of the virtues of that book is that it came with a package of short tutorials and Excel spreadsheets that could be used for various assignments and exercises in learning to use Excel. And I didn't even think they were necessarily great exercises, but of course it made my job a lot easier. As first time teaching this class, I was very happy to have them, but not delivering the education I wanted to deliver. And so I've been putting work into these Excel tutorials. Now, the other reason I undertook this project, and in fact created the other class that most of these videos are from, the Spreadsheet Fundamentals class, is that I could also see that our students we're in a college of business are using Excel throughout our curriculum. And so there's potentially a really big payback on this project because students will be able to use these resources I've created and I'm continuing to create in many of their other classes in the curriculum too. And so I hopefully, as I continue this project, is going to reap a really big payback. And so I'm very excited about this one. All right, well, how am I doing it? How might you do it? And I'm just going to scratch the surface here, but I want to say that there are a lot of approaches you can take to OER, and I'm having a little fun with this meme here, but I really do mean that you do not have to jump in with both feet. You might say, well, Rob, you are writing a textbook and you're creating hours and hours of video from scratch. And I'm a busy person. I'm teaching 4, maybe 5 classes. I don't have time for that. And nobody's given me a budget to do it. And, maybe I get a grant. It's not a lot of money, right? I can't get a course release. Not a problem, right? Because there are different strategies you can use. And the the easiest thing to do is to just look at your existing courses and say, where can I make these courses better by adopting some existing OER, right? Is there something I could do that would be supplementary to what I'm doing now that OER would allow me to achieve? Let me go find some resources. Maybe it's just one module that you can add, that you can use OER to add. Now you've improved your course for your students. You haven't saved them any money over what they were spending before, right? But you've delivered a better product. Or you might say, okay, great, I'm going to go out and find some existing OER. There are classes for which there's a lot out there. So Principles of Economics is one example. There are several pretty complete textbooks out there already. And, depending on your approach, some will fit better than others. Some are very math heavy, not appropriate in our program, but, maybe fit what you're doing. Or you might find, for example, that some of those principles textbooks are useful supplements in an intermediate micro or a managerial economics course, right? So look around, see what exists, and see if you can replace the commercial textbook you're using now, right? And that's not going to take as much work, right, as writing a textbook from scratch or creating materials from scratch for your course. So you can use this to make your job easier and the product you're delivering to your students better without going whole hog. But there's more you can do, right? And so there are a lot of resources out there. They're spread out all over the internet. Sometimes it can be a challenge to find them. I'm continually finding new things that I didn't know exist out in OER land. And you might instead say, well, I want to make a resource now that other folks can use. I want to give back. I want to contribute. I'm not ready to create these things from scratch, but what I could do is curate some collections of existing resources, right? I could find openly licensed materials, maybe not even ones that have been purposely created as OER, but I'm gonna look for those. I'm gonna gather them together. I'm gonna put them into a course reader, right? I'm gonna edit a course reader. Maybe you're writing a small piece of that, like an introduction, right? But mostly you're taking existing materials, you're editing them into one cohesive whole, add a sample syllabus for other instructors, package it up and say, here is something you could use in a course. And these would be fantastic, for example, in upper level courses where you're often asking students to go read things and you're pulling together various journal articles or texts, books even of various kinds. Maybe you can create something that replaces a commercial reader A lot of commercial readers think about older literature courses where everything's already in the public domain. What are you really gaining by buying a commercial reader, right? Or case studies, or if you're looking at law, right? You might be able to include a whole bunch of stuff from existing opinions and so forth if you're careful about the minefield of references there, and create something that everyone in your class can use, but other instructors can use. And this is not as big a project as creating everything from scratch. And I'll show you an excellent example of this in a second. Now, adapting and improving existing OER, right? So maybe you start out in your first semester, you adopt someone else's text, and you say, okay, great. Well, this was great, but I feel like this chapter needs to be updated, or I need to add a chapter about something, right? There's your next level. Okay, now I'm going to take this resource and add to it and then re-release my improved version. And in fact, the text that I'm using now in business information systems comes from a fine group of Canadian professors who took someone else's existing text and then added a bunch of other open resources to it, and also gave it a Canadian spin to make it more applicable for their students. So really great example of that. And then finally, of course, right, once you've really learned how to use all the software that you need to make these things work, and you've got a lot of experience and you're feeling confident, well, maybe you should go create something from scratch. So that's the most fun, I think, because you get to put your personal stamp on something. But not to say that this is necessarily any better than anything else, right? All OER is good OER. All right, so how do we find some OER? Well, there are tons of resources out there, and I'm just linking here a few places you can get started. And briefly, what each of these are. Merlot has been around for a long time. This is an effort that is mostly out of California, I believe. And it is good. And you should go ahead and you should sign up, get yourself an account there, review some resources to help out other instructors who are looking for things, maybe add some resources. You don't have to just add your own. You can add links to other resources that aren't yet in the catalog. And this is great for discovering stuff. Now, the downside is there's so much stuff there, and not all of it is excellent quality. And this is why the reviewing aspect is really important. It can take some time to sort through what's there, but the good news is there is a lot there. So this is a great starting point, and this is probably where I would start if I were searching for things. The second item on the list here, OER Commons, is, I believe, it would be fair to say that it's both a repository and a software platform. So you will see that some states, I think our friends in Maryland, right across the border from us here at Shepherd, for their OER archives are using an instance of this software or something hosted by the folks behind OER Commons. I forget the exact details. But so you'll see some sort of sub-collections of things coming out of this same effort. And it's nice software. So I think even though it's not maybe as comprehensive as Merlot, most of what you find there is going to be fairly current and usable. So it's also a good place to start. Look at both. Pressbooks is interesting. This is a platform for publishing OER content. So if you're looking to create something or remix something, and you don't feel confident about using the software yourself, you would rather have someone's web version of that, Pressbooks might not be bad. And I think there is also a path to go from doing things at Pressbooks to exporting your source files and then doing them another way. So, this might be something to look at as a resource for creating content, but also you'll see that there's a lot of content there, including the text that I'm using for my business information systems class. Of course, we've already mentioned MIT OpenCourseWare, fantastic resource. One of the ways I might use this site would be to look for problem sets and other things that will supplement classes, because so much of the course material is there. Everything that was given to the students essentially is there for most of the courses. So great resource. OpenStax is an interesting resource. Now, they have a business model you might or might not like. Everybody's got to make a living and support the work they're doing. And what they're doing there at OpenStax is giving away OER content on their website and, updating it and maintaining it and doing some hard work. And in return, right, they're hoping that folks will buy some things from them. So some ancillary resources, like I believe they offer some online homework solutions. They also offer printed copies of the text, and they would be very happy if your students who wanted a printed copy bought one from them. So, no objection to that, but it may not be exactly the vibe you're looking for. The good news is for all their content, they seem to be doing a great job of publishing things under an appropriate license and offering it in a format, not my chosen format, but one you might like, namely MS Word files, right? So if you're a Microsoft Word lover, then you can download, in addition to the PDF version of the text, which is pretty nice. I think your students will like it. Typically, they're very complete with, end of chapter problems and glossaries. In addition to all of that, right, they have those Microsoft Word files you can download so that you can edit them and customize and remix them. So definitely worth a look. There's not, it's a select group of resources, but I think all the resources they do have there are very high quality. So it's worth taking a look at. And I've thrown this one in here, especially for our colleagues at the community and technical colleges, because Skills Commons is doing something very interesting. And that is focusing on content that's not necessarily for, our traditional academic university courses, but more of the hands-on skills. I think I've seen things there for aviation, various mechanical things, maybe nursing. I don't remember all the things that they have there. I don't spend a lot of time on that site because I don't teach those sort of things. But I think I originally found them when I was searching for sort of computer science related content, and they did have that as well, if I remember correctly. So if you're coming from that side of the house, as it were, definitely have a look at Skills Commons and see if they have something that could be useful to you. Whoops. All right, now I promised you an example of curating a collection, and this is my West Virginia colleague, Jeremy Lawrence. And Jeremy has created a fantastic resource called BritLit. And the bad news is the platform that he's using here is sort of taken another direction, and the project may not continue to be viable in its current form. But I encourage you to go look at what's there, download all the resources that you think might be useful to you, and then, if you can work with Jeremy to do something else with this, by all means, get in touch with him. He's a friendly guy. But you can see that, first of all, this is, a very attractive site, and you've got a lot of resources here. And if you know anything about this era of literature, you know that, for all of these authors, there are a lot of resources already available on the internet from places like Project Gutenberg, the venerable Project Gutenberg. There's no reason that the texts that are here, or at least some of the texts that are here, should be locked up in copyright. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle here, I believe, maybe there might be still some of his works that aren't in the public domain, but if they aren't, they will be soon, right? So no reason you should have your students buy a copy of these resources. And what Jeremy's done here is added to the resources themselves, the texts themselves. He's added other resources like introductions written by various scholars. I think, if I remember correctly, he's done the work of going out to scholars who might have written something that wasn't intended as OER, but then, gotten them to license it to him as an open resource. And so he's created a fantastic collection. And if I were teaching BritLit, I would definitely be using this. And I've certainly, as a William Blake fan, I've taken a look around this part of the site for sure, and it's great fun. So even just for your own entertainment, go have a look at BritLit. All right, now how do we create all this stuff? How do we adapt it and remix it? I'm just going to throw out here some examples of open source software and formats that you can use to create things, and all of these are things that I'm currently using in my own workflow. With the exception of Kden Live, I don't have a lot of call for it, but I have used it in the past and probably will again in the future. And this is just scratching the surface. And of course, you can also use commercial software. There are many paths to creating this stuff, but I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing. So, first of all, for my textbook, actually for everything I'm doing, I write the original textual or web page, PDF. All those things come from Markdown, and Markdown is a plain text format. It's a way to write things in any text editor. I use VI. You might use Notepad or TextEdit, or pick your favorite text editor or whatever it might be. And then turn those. You can turn those source files into, first of all, HTML, which was the original intention of Markdown many years back, the end of the previous century, if I remember correctly. Markdown really comes out of the way that people were writing in plain text in order to sort of show emphasis and other things that were not available in early email systems and forum posting and so forth. Yes, I am that old. It really comes very naturally, I think, for most of us. At least the first 90% of it is very natural. And it is in many ways similar to LaTeX in spirit, except it's much simpler than LaTeX, much simpler than TeX. Although the beautiful thing is, if you want to have equations in your text, LaTeX can be embedded inside the Markdown. So can HTML if you want to customize that way. So it's not an either or choice, certainly. But for most people, I think LaTeX is a big ask. Right? If you're not already doing something that's equation heavy, you're probably not using LaTeX. So Markdown is, I think, a great way to start. Now, I've gone from using LaTeX for everything to using Markdown with embedded LaTeX for just the equations, and I find that much simpler. Now, what do you do with all this stuff after you create it? You use Pandoc. Pandoc is a fantastic piece of software written by an academic who uses it himself for his things. And I recently, found a small bug, opened an issue. It was fixed in less than 24 hours, I think. It is fantastic software, a fantastic community around it. You can find a lot of support for it, in the various places that you might go to look for, ask questions about how to do things. And it is the Swiss Army knife of document conversion. You want to take your Markdown and turn it into HTML or EPUB or PDF or a Word document or a bunch of other things. Pandoc will do that. You want to turn your Word document into a PDF. You want to turn your Word document into HTML. You want to turn your EPUB back into HTML, right? Whichever direction you want to go, almost all of them, Pandoc will do it for you. And it also supports a whole bunch of other lesser known formats you might use for particular things, like creating a flowchart or something like that. So it is fantastic software, and I'm using it every day, basically. And I should just say, you'll find this useful even if you're not creating OER content. I mean, it is useful just for any everyday use. All right, so I can't say enough great things about Pandoc. It's also, all of these are cross-platform. So whether you're on a Mac, on Windows, on Linux, or other Unixes, we got you covered. Okay, so another venerable piece of open source software, the GNU image manipulation program. Maybe not the best name in open source, but it's too late to change it now. It's been around for decades. If you would like something that does basically all the things that Photoshop does, but in free open source software, GIMP's got you covered. I use it all the time for doing simple tasks. I'm not a big graphics person, but if I need to resize a photo or change it to a different format or maybe add some text to it, this is what I open up most of the time. Similarly, Audacity is for audio. And I use this all the time as a DJ to make, mixes. But it is a fantastic open source tool. If you've ever mixed sound in any analog or digital, you'll find it, fairly simple to use. Again, it may not have every feature of the latest, greatest, whatever a professional DJ who's creating commercial tracks is using. Maybe not. But if you want to record a podcast or edit a podcast or, just mix in some audio for your lectures or, whatever you might want to do with audio, Audacity is great. And it's pretty easy to use if you know anything about audio to start with. The video equivalent, OBS Studio, the Open Broadcaster software, that's what I'm using right now, in fact, to record this. I used Markdown and Pandoc to create these slides, and I used GIMP to edit some of the images, and I'm using OBS to record this screencast. And this is fantastic software. This is professional quality video software. If you know anything about mixing sound or video, you'll find it fairly natural. And the way I typically use it is to just record live because it allows me to mix things up live. If I wanted to drop my face into this video, I could do that. If I wanted to have multiple windows all mixed together, I wanted to bring in multiple sound sources, I could do all that stuff and I could mix it live. Now, obviously you can also post-process, and Kdenlive is something you can use for that. But I find that I get acceptable quality even with my slow mouse hand with OBS, and it really is amazing. If you want to work with a green screen, it's got you covered. If you want to broadcast to various streaming platforms, it has you covered. And you may be interested to know, again, not even for creating OER, that you can use it as a virtual camera. So if you want to mix live while you're on a Zoom call or using Microsoft Teams or something like that, OBS also has you covered for that. So can't say enough nice things about all these tools. And again, you'll find them useful for many things other than creating OER content. But it's good to know, I think, that you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money to get the software you need to create and adapt and remix these materials. Okay, so a quick word here at the end to say a little bit about what we're doing here at Shepherd this year. So 6 of us in the College of Business, along with our instructional designer and our LMS administrator here at Shepherd, have been awarded one of the 10 OER Challenge grants from West Virginia this academic year, and very much appreciate that. Very excited to be beginning this project. And our sort of like core focus, I guess we'd say, would be for the immediate impact of this to get more courses being offered to our business administration majors where we already have a good start at having OER sections of the course available, to having more courses that are using OER. And so this is sort of the very immediate and visible impact is that we'll have by next year, right, in regular rotation, courses that are part of our core, like Principles of Marketing, like Business Statistics, in addition to the ones already being offered, like Principles of Economics and the Spreadsheet Fundamentals course that I teach, and our Business Information Systems course that I teach, right? Many of the courses that our students need to take to finish their business administration major will be available in at least one section that is offering the course with OER. So that's going to be a great immediate impact. But we want to do something beyond that. So one of the things that we're doing to professors in our program here have some experience working with students to create content in the capstone course in business administration. And they're going to put together sort of a framework for others that want to replicate that, and will be used in the spring in our capstone course in business administration. And so we're going to redistribute that in a format that hopefully will be able to be imported easily into other folks' learning management systems, which means you won't have to recreate the wheel. Of course, you're going to have to adapt it to what you're doing in your course, but we're, hopefully give you a little start and some ideas to work with so that you're not starting from zero. And I think the big overall long-term vision of this project is to do more of that, to do things that make it easier for everybody to adopt OER and get started on the flywheel of using and adapting and improving OER. Another thing we're doing there here just directly at Shepherd is to get these materials that we're using packaged and put on the learning object repository on Brightspace. And what that will allow is for any instructor that wants to use those to go out, grab them from the learning object repository just by clicking through in Brightspace and add them to their course. And not just add them, but add them in a way that will be dynamically updated if we make improvements, correct typos, whatever, to those materials. And a lot of instructors, right, don't necessarily have a highly technical approach to their course creation, right? Especially if you're not teaching an online course, it may seem like getting all these materials into the learning management system is a whole lot of work, right? You've got to figure out what formats things need to be in them, possibly do some conversion with our old friend Pandoc perhaps, but still you've got to do that. You've got to upload them. And then, when you're adding them to the next semester's course, you need to be copying them from one semester to the other. And that's kind of a pain, right? Because, all of us are improving our courses and changing things around every semester. So even if you have old materials there, you're going to have to selectively copy and then update them again. And wow, that's a lot of work. I know it's a lot of work because I'm doing it all the time. And we would like to cut out a lot of that work and do that more efficiently. So obviously all of our instructors here at Shepherd have the academic freedom to use whatever text is appropriate for the course, but this way they'll have options that are very easy to add to their courses, whether selectively or, a whole hog. And that includes, of course, those Excel videos that you saw earlier. Anyone in any course that wants to use those here at Shepherd can just copy the appropriate ones into their Brightspace section. So that's, will be part of the impact here at Shepherd. But of course, we also want to let others build on the work we're doing here. So for all of these, when I say package, I mean putting them into one of the standard formats like SCORM, which is really, really widely supported. And I think people have the misconception that, SCORM is all about doing things where you're recording grades back in the grade book and all this programmatic interaction. Well, yes, it can do all those things, but it's also usable as just a very simple way to bundle up a bunch of, web page like resources, other files, put it all together in a way you can easily put on the LOR. So that's the way I've been using it, because I know that everybody supports SCORM, right? There's a lot of other formats, but the support isn't quite there for some of them. So that's like the lowest common denominator. But then there are other formats, right? The LTI format for test banks, the common cartridge format for, it's a little kind of like a more up-to-date and versatile SCORM, might be one way to say it. So we're going to try to get things into the appropriate formats and all packaged so that instructors at other schools in West Virginia, but also beyond, can just grab those packages and upload them, or even from within their LMS, just point at the URL that has that package and bring it all right into their courses. And one place they might do that is into their own learning object repository. So Brightspace has one of those, but so does Canvas. I believe Blackboard and other software. Moodle, I think, has one. There are analogs in all the other LMS software pretty much. So even just one person doing that at an institution would then put it in a place that everybody could get at it very easily. So if we do this right, this is potentially even easier than adopting a commercial text, because for many of those, you either have to download the package and then upload it to your LMS, or you have to add a connector of some kind that brings their content into your LMS, and that's just one more thing for your LMS administrator to have to deal with, and one more thing that can break. So I think this is a superior way of sending around content. And I think one of the best things about it is instead of having content quote unquote on your LMS that really lives somewhere else, it'll be content that lives on your LMS and will still be there at the end of the semester, most importantly. All right, so anyway, that's part of what we're doing, and then of course training materials both for use here at Shepherd and beyond, so that end users of OER can learn more about it. As we've just kind of given an overview here, right? Can we go into more detail about how to do these things? I think we can. We need to address accessibility, which is something all of us need to be thinking about. And also for those of us kind of doing the work behind the scenes, doing the packaging of the content, doing the conversion of content, getting it into the LMS, getting the LMS to make things searchable from beyond the LMS in the Learning Object Repository, a whole bunch of things that we're going to be getting started on doing, documenting for other people so that they can replicate what we're doing and use the fruits of our labor. And this is, again, the beauty of open educational resources, that we can share our work in this way and really leverage any work that's done on OER. So I'm so excited to be undertaking this project. Well, so let me add here and say I will eventually get these slides on my website. I think they are there somewhere, but they're not linked. So I'll have these slides. I will also have slides from some other presentations that go into more detail on some of the technical pieces of this. But feel free to just email me here at Shepherd and ask me for the slides or for more information. If you're someone that works at another university and you have a different LMS than Brightspace, that would be great to know, because we'll be looking for people to test out some of these packages we produce on other software, make sure they work okay. If you're someone who is also working on similar things in terms of doing packaging content using your own scripts and processes or open source software, would be great to talk to you. If you're at all interested in OER, I want to be your new best friend. So please get in touch. I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to find me there and hook up there. And ooh, it looks like I have timed things perfectly, and I've made it under an hour, which, if you know me, is quite an accomplishment because I am a loquacious individual. So thanks for listening, and happy OERing. Come on in. The water's fine, and we're having a good time here.